welcome to the second uh, conversation on COVID-19 versus. And I do hope everybody in your home and in your teams are safe. And yes, as we go through these trying times, together we can make a difference. So this afternoon, I'd like to thank you for taking time to join us. And I invite all of us to just take a moment to think of one good thing that has happened to you today and be thankful for it. So, to continue, there's a few housekeeping rules, and we can see them on our screen. Thanks to Sean, our community outreach and programming manager, who has put the slides together, and he will take us through the rest of this conversation. But just to let you know that this conversation is being recorded. The recording and the chat will be made public afterward. Use the conversation function to share thoughts and ask questions through the chat. Please introduce yourself in the chat so we know who you are. Please keep your mic muted until you're about to speak. And that's basically to avoid any technical difficulties. And when you're speaking, say your name and your organization. That's very helpful for all of us. When you are speaking, you're welcome to turn on your webcam if you wish. And if you finish early, that's okay. So, Sean, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Marina. I'm just also decided, okay, I'll showcase my outfit today. I'm wearing a shalwar kameez. So we'll just quickly go through what the context of the discussion is today. Really, the discussion, now and in the future is going to be driven by all of you, not really by us. We want to know what's going to be most beneficial to you. And if we cover what we need to cover, I realize there are a lot of other tables and teleconferences that are coming up, that you're very busy people. So we want to make sure we're providing you value, but also not taking you away from tasks that are also important. But we feel it's very important to provide that platform and to be strategic. So we'll talk a little bit about emergency responders, which is our strategy as far as engaging the community and volunteering at this time. We'll talk about a skills questionnaire so that we can kind of identify who in the community can provide what kinds of skills. Updating your volunteer positions. We'll get Robert in that as well to share some thoughts about that. We'll talk about some standard communications through website, social channels, and then your sort of one-to-one communications via email or phones and teleconferencing. Then we'll talk a little bit about how we might align ourselves, and we'll get into some discussion. So, first of all, going through to the emergency responders, I will first explain, what we're talking about. So, Volunteer NBC, as the volunteer center for the region, we refer volunteers to many organizations. Normally, with our organizations that are member organizations, they purchase their membership, which allows them to vote in our AGM, and it gives them the opportunity to also access our referral services, where they post positions, and when they post their positions, they can recruit volunteers. Volunteers apply to them, and we're constantly getting the message out there in the community about the importance of volunteering. So now, with the crisis upon us, that landscape is looking a little bit different, where there are lots of people interested in helping, but it's not clear exactly, which opportunities there are to help and how people can help. And so we want to make that easier. And so we've done a couple of things. First of all, we're offering a 90-day emergency subscription so that our organizations that are not necessarily already part of our volunteer center framework can be able to access that opportunity to post positions as an emergency response. And we're following suit with some other volunteer centers that have offered that kind of support. So we really want the organizations that are seeking volunteers to be able to do that, and that 90-day subscription is free. So we're not we're allowing them to be able to post some positions and working with them to get those positions online. Now that said, because there's still fewer positions than there are interested people in helping. So yesterday we sent out a communication to about 20,000 people by email, and we had lots and lots of people interested in helping. And so we basically are offering setting up a funnel where everybody would come through, through a single position to be able to say, yes, I want to help during this COVID-19 emergency. And this is part of our communication strategy, as well as to ensure people that they have a way that they can make a difference, and that there are things that they can do. So then once they come through and apply to that position, then we would take them and mobilize them into the right positions with other organizations. And if there still remains an overflow of people willing to help and not enough positions, then we're going to keep working on that as far as finding ways to engage people and keep them helping. And so that's partly what we're talking about today, is around that concept of the ways people can help, and how we can leverage our volunteer bases to not feel helpless, but to feel empowered that they're making a difference. Partly they're making a difference in a major way by actually experiencing physical distancing and social isolation, physical isolation, but then also empowering them with ways that they can make a difference. So that's basically what the emergency responders position is. And once I turn the floor to Robert, he'll explain a little bit more on that subject as well as the positions. Similarly, one thing that's very important for us is identifying what kinds of skills people have, both that are emergency related and non-emergency related, because there are still going to be positions, still support that organizations may need at their board level. They may need it technology-wise, other things that they're looking to recruit volunteers for. And so we're definitely going to all the volunteers that are interested at this time and asking them additional questions to really identify what their skill sets are and be able to provide greater support on skills-based volunteering. So that's a little bit sort of a context, of this discussion, as far as how Volunteer in BC is providing support. It'll really be about you and how you can leverage your existing volunteer base, or if you are seeking to grow your volunteer base, then what we can do to support you in doing that. And so one of the key things is for us to know what your volunteer positions are, and also to be able to really speak to the situation and the context that we're finding ourselves in. So on that front, I'd like to invite Robert to talk to us a little bit about catering our volunteer positions toward meaningful engagement at this in the state of emergency that we're in, and also how you might go about doing that. So Robert, I can turn it over to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Sean, and welcome everybody. And I just sent out an email this morning. I know to a few people I recognize who have joined us, and I think that's fabulous. I'm going to sort of work with what I sent out a little bit, but the first thing I'm going to do is mention, or specifically what Sean referred to. In the last 24 hours, we've created a position known as COVID-19 Community Responder. And that's I think the funnel that Sean was talking about, or in fact, as I call it, a bit of a clearinghouse. Certainly it's a focus for people who have, obviously the public has access to our website, but our volunteer clients who have profiles will undoubtedly have access to this, perhaps more knowledgeably than anybody else. But I want to point out a couple of things about that that position, the content, because in my view, it's worthwhile for everybody to read. But under the description, pardon me, it goes through several classic examples of the type of volunteering role that certainly Peel Region volunteers could engage in. I'm just going to very briefly sort of almost give you labels. One is a telephone check-in and reassurance. One is pickup delivery of vital medications for seniors, others who cannot leave their residences. Another one that's certainly a big, I'm certainly aware of its growing popularity, is pickup delivery of groceries and meals who cannot travel or otherwise provide for themselves. And also, as Sean was mentioning, and he will come back to this, social media messaging. And along with that, obviously, in order for us to become conversant in dealing in virtually online, you may also need IT support from volunteers who know more about this than probably all the rest of us. So that's also something to consider. Another one is virtual office administration. Obviously, some people are better at that than others. That's a resource that perhaps could be tapped, and getting perhaps a little more theoretical project management volunteer to develop, support, and deliver COVID-19 plans. And even on an informal basis, and we're seeing some of this, is we have neighborhood sort of pop-ups, so to speak, and we call that community block or neighborhood connectors. Again, it's all about people, isn't it? But the thing is that we have to do it for the most part virtually at this point. One of the interesting things, though, is that position, since it was put online, has attracted almost 50 applicants through our system. And that's a pretty impressive return almost immediately. A few days ago, I went through the current inventory of volunteer positions within that are active within our website, and I could count confidently 28 that could be easily sort of worked with or adapted for COVID-19 purposes. And these relate to things like telephone reassurance, as I pointed out. And in terms of other things, social media is getting increasingly relevant to volunteering regardless of COVID. So in terms of dealing with social media, if you have a social media need or you have a social media role that's on our website, please review it and think about your needs in the short term and also in terms of a long-term investment. It's easy to adapt a current volunteer position, obviously, as many of you know, by going into your member account and making necessary changes. But the other thing you can do, which I think is perhaps more useful, is there's a heading under the ribbon under volunteer positions that's known as duplicate. All you do is you click on the icon under that, and you get a duplicate of an existing, presumably related position to what you want, and you can edit that position, at least that duplicate, and that duplicate, once you submit it or update it, it will become a new position in its own right. So that saves you from having to go through creating something from virtual scratch. So I'm just pointing that out as one tool that's available to you. As far as support, I am here. My email address, and I think we some of you know it already, but for those who are not quite familiar with it, is projectsupport@volunteernbc.org. And I'd encourage you to email me. Firstly, because I'm not in the office, so but I will get back to you either by email or by phone. And anything you post, anything you update, I inevitably will see, and I'll collaborate with you. I think that pretty well covers it, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert. Just echoing what Robert said, we definitely would love to see your positions come through and be able to support whatever your volunteer needs would be at this time. And even if you're seeing needs in the community that you may not yet, your organization itself might not be the main organization to address it. But if you're identifying needs or you're knowing people who are vulnerable and so forth, you can let us know so that we can find the right community partners who would be able to provide that service and support them in this difficult time. In the chat box, I put a link to the responder's position as well as Robert's email address as well, so that you can check with him as well. And certainly, if you have positions that have already been posted, but they're not relevant, or you feel the need that they should be unpublished, Robert is your go-to person for that. So thanks, Robert. So coming back to the agenda, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the traditional and non-traditional ways that you can start to engage your community, especially around your website and social media. So speaking a little bit to the website. So many of you would have already had some kind of a policy or statement published onto your website as far as what is the status of operation. So, in many cases, since organizations are operating remotely, that would be the case. Some of the essential service organizations that are still offering some service might have some limited service and would have some additional information to provide there around their safety protocols and risk management related messaging. So if you haven't already done that, that is certainly something that you would want to lean on. For smaller organizations or newer organizations that may not have developed their website as fully, you may not realize how many people are finding you or Googling you. So it's really important that you may not always get the chance to interact with that person, and they've already tried to get information from you by coming to your website. So make sure that is first and foremost there. In the case of Volunteer in BC, for example, on our positions, we've put an alert that some of the positions may not be active, and that we're in the process of updating them, as well as that our organizations might need a little more time to respond to applicants, and other logical sort of warnings that you can provide to people visiting your website is certainly a foremost good practice. At the same time, there are some more proactive things that you can do that can take you from beyond simply stating what is to stating what can be. And that's where both the website and social media come in handy. And so certainly identifying certain key messages is what we recommend is the first task to do. There are some key messages that probably all of our organizations are going to have in common. So I'm going to share my screen a little bit here and give you an idea of how we've been organizing some of our key messages and the types of things that we'd like to express to our community. So give me a second as I share my screen. One of the things about what is a key message? Key messages are the broad types of ideas that you're trying to express. The wording around each of those key messages can be refined and so forth. But basically, what we're really aiming to do is get people to know within our organization what is it that we're trying to bring across. I'm just zooming in here so people can find it more readable, but I will read it out so for accessibility reasons. So we basically have different key messages. Some of these key messages are specific to your organization, and some key messages, as I said, will be broad across many organizations. So, for Volunteer BC, we always want to let you know that we're here to help you, and we want to offer to collaborate with you. And so one of our key messages in this case was to join our teleconference, right? And so in that case, that was an audience message was to our organizations, right? And so we've set up, a simple spreadsheet for our internal purposes around our marketing communications personnel, as well as for our marketing communications volunteers on our media team to be able to get those messages out there. But there are some other key messages that you may find very relevant to you. Now, some of them are related to caring. So we might want to tell people that you know, we want to give them ideas for how to care for others, and we might suggest, okay, we want to send an e-card, right? That sending an e-card would be a good idea. Then we come up with, you know, the specific messaging around it, like the wording and what images will be associated with that, and we build our web and social media templates based on that. You know, we empower other people to say, you know, hey, do you have an idea of how to help people during the emergency? Reach out to us and we can bring it to life. So even if your organization says, well, we may not be able to capitalize on bringing people's ideas to life, well, you could, because you can certainly relay those people over to Volunteer MDC to be able to find them again, connect them to an organization that would align with their idea and their objectives, to be able to let people know that, hey, you don't. It's not that you're alone. You have the ability to make a difference at this time. That's a lot of what our messaging is about. And then certainly there are a lot in the health and safety category that we want to emphasize: the importance of staying home, public health practices, do's and don'ts, and some other key messages. And so we continue to build key messages. We add new ones. We relegate some when they're you know, lower priority at a certain time, and we build our key messages first. And once we have identified the key messages, then we start to work on the individual refining of those key messages. Because once you understand your key messages, then, you know, throughout your organization, there's an understanding of what's being conveyed and how. Within your organization, you can even put a call out and say, hey, is there something that you want, you know, me to communicate to my volunteers? Is there something that outside of these key messages that we're offering that, you know, we should be adding in? And those are the types of things that help your organizations convey. You may not necessarily be the marketing person at your organization, but because you're in that position where you're engaging with volunteers, you'll have to, you know, each person is becoming a sort of a multifaceted jack of all trades. You know, you end up having to use a little bit of social media, and you need to use a little bit of the website, and you need to use a little bit of, you know, email and teleconferencing to engage your volunteers and get these same messages out there. So whether that's the organizational wide messaging that you might be going through your marketing personnel, if you have other marketing personnel, or whether it's something that you're doing on an individual basis, it's really important that you've identified those key messages. And you know, this will be, you know, certainly an important thing. I wanted to call on Vrunda to talk a little bit about, you know, one of our key messages and some ideas she had. We certainly want to foster a lot of the building of more key messages, and so one of our key messages is around, you know, circulation of misinformation, and especially getting information from trustworthy sources such as Peel Public Health. So there's a lot of different memes and quotes and things traveling across social media right now, and it's really important that we convey that. So Vrunda, could I pass it to you to comment on this?
Yeah, as in there's a lot of misinformation about COVID-19, and it ultimately results in panic. For example, today CBC had a report that how people are making sanitizer at home without proper guidelines. So that is very dangerous. You know, there is a lot of, you know, there are reports that so and so store is out of stock, so rush and buy whatever you need, but they are not out of stock, and all of that, it falls under misinformation. Because misinformation, according to me, is a vicious cycle. One thing leads to another, so it's very important that we debunk those information, and I have a series of such misinformation with me currently.
Great. Thank you, Vrunda. So, you know, that's an example of a message that, you know, across the community we may want to get out there. And, you know, and I know we have folks from, you know, Peel Public Health and other public health adjacent organizations that, you know, would also be wanting to tell us, hey, you know, these are key messages that we want to get out there. So, you know, in our discussion, we'll also, you know, hear from you if there what other key messages, you know, are important, and build them into our messaging, and encourage our member organizations and our broader community to also reinforce those messages. The key here is that identifying, you know, good key messages around Peel Public Health is to go to good sources. Now, Canva, which is a tool for actually creating social media posts and really makes it easier to create graphical infographics and engaging content. They've even come out with a whole set of templates that are specifically public health related about how to not spread germs or spread the virus, break the chain of contagion, and they've come up with these templates, and these templates are all based on messaging from the World Health Organization. So going from a trustworthy source to getting good information, and then finding ways in which we can produce that content easily, is excellent. And so I'll put a link to the Canva templates as well into the chat shortly. So we also have other key messages about isolation. This is a big deal for Volunteer in BC at this time. And we will definitely want to convey to people that they're not alone. If you've received some of our email messaging, both for organizations or for residents in the community, you would have seen us reinforcing that message that we're doing this together, that we're all in it together, that don't feel lonely, you can connect with us, and another messaging like that. And templates around the importance of calling up an old friend and reaching out to people, and even in the volunteer roles, phone check-ins and so forth are really important to us. Just a time check, we're getting close to 1 o'clock and we have some time remaining. So I want to touch base on a few other points that are relevant to us now. We've been certainly trying to engage volunteers in our communication process. And so some of you may also be thinking about engaging volunteers to help you with your social media. And so if you're trying to do that, it can be tricky for volunteers to know what are the what. Even a skilled volunteer with excellent social media skills may be able to help you with the how. But knowing the what of what should be the messaging, that is where your organizational savvy, your knowledge of what your organization is doing and what it prioritizes as its mission and objectives are going to be paramount. So aside from the broader messages the community shares, you'll need to consider that. So definitely, if you're engaging volunteers, or if you're considering engaging volunteers to help you with some of that messaging at this time, you can recruit through us, and certainly if that's a need you have, let us know, post a position, and even some of the applicants through our emergency responders position could be funneled to you there, or other skilled volunteers that we've been engaging with for quite some time. Then we'll help you have the personnel to deliver it. But as far as actually engaging those volunteers and managing the collective media effort, which is tricky because with marketing media, things are going out in the community. You want to make sure that everything is consistent, that wrong information doesn't go out. So it's really important to identify your key messages and so forth. So if you'd like to have a template, something like the spreadsheet that I've created to manage to work with our volunteers, you can definitely access that and let me know, and we can create one for you. Maybe we can even customize it a little bit for you so that it speaks to the kind of messaging that you want to convey. Now, that said, there's also email and phone communications that are going out. So a few things that are smart to do. Update your email signatures if you haven't done so already to indicate that you're working remotely, if that's the case. If you are working remotely, people have asked, is it necessary to have an out-of-office reply on? And my advice was, since so many people, millions of people are working remotely, it might be the case that they are expecting you to be working remotely. So as long as your policy on your website indicates that you're working remotely, and you've indicated in your email signature that you're working remotely, you may not need put an out-of-office reply all the time. If you have additional information you really want to convey in an out-of-office automatic reply, then that would be worth doing. But certainly consider putting it in your email signature, and links, even a link to Peel Public Health or useful information is a worthwhile thing to consider putting into your email signature as well. Outside of that, when you're actually sending emails out to people and they're going back and forth, make sure that you're asking how they're doing, how are they coping, so, and make it heartfelt. Sometimes an email starts with "How are you?" and it just sounds like a generic "How are you?" versus really "How are you?" And that's important. So make it personal and try to reach out to people, let them know. A good standard practice anyway is if there are any accommodations that we can provide, let us know. If there's any way that we can help, let us know. That's a good practice to kind of include in your email communications, especially with external parties. But check in on your team as well. That's for email communications, and same goes for phone, although when you're phoning and teleconferencing, the main trick is to try to go through things from the top and kind of repeat things every so often so that people joining in can get the same messaging. So those are some good practices as far as conveying messaging. I want to get into our discussion questions now and really hear from all of you. So let me ensure that my screen is appearing here. 1 second. So just a minute. So around the discussion. So first of all, I'd like to hear from some of you. What are some key messages that your organization is trying to share at this time? Some of you might be really leaning in on some of the messages that I discussed. Are there other specific messages unique to your organization? Are there messages that we didn't mention that are really worth exploring, or that you'd like to even see Volunteer NBC convey? Let's open up the floor for some discussion, and please be sure to introduce yourself, and you're welcome to turn on your camera if you wish when you're talking. Make sure you unmute yourself, and feel free to chime in at your convenience. I'm sure that many of you are thinking here around, what is it that I should be conveying? Or maybe I've been conveying the same things other people are conveying, but I'm okay to hear it twice. In the comments, we've got, what do I see here? We are from Andrea at Cal Community Services. It says, we are getting a lot of people reaching out wanting to volunteer at a food bank, but due to health regulations, we cannot allow them to. We're trying to convert them to donors instead. Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things that I think is certainly important to remember, in times of crisis, there are things that people intuitively try to do. They try to donate more food to food banks, and I recommend that's an excellent thing to do. It's food security being an issue, but conveying to people the importance and the value of donating, financially as well, is really important. So you can use this time to mention, hey, look, this is a tough time for the community. Rally together to support this organization. And if you're teaming up or partnering with some of the frontline organizations that are providing critical essential services at this time, especially the food banks that are strained, let them know that. If they're donating to support a food bank, maybe make that to speak to that food bank and see if you can echo some of their messaging, or show your logo side by side to say that we're really supporting this food bank at this time. Volunteer NBC has several food banks among its member organizations. If you are thinking about doing something like that and you want to be connected to a food bank near you, please reach out to us, and we can help facilitate that connection.
Robert here. I just want to add, there's at least one fairly high-profile food bank in Peel Region that's set up through its own media communications, a gilt-edged invitation, as I call it, for people who've never donated in kind before to a food bank to drive over with certain items, certain products at specific times. So I don't know whether, Andrea, that's sort of also a direction in which you want to head with at your food bank. But I know that there's at least one organization that already has all that procedure in place, and I don't know how they're doing, but I suspect they'd probably be doing very, very well, because a lot of people, they want to contribute, but they don't know how to contribute. And what that organization is doing is practically laying out a complete package as to how you can help us right now.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, and again, like, it's something that each organization may have some specific initiatives that they're trying to push at this time, new programs that are to be developed or repurposed programs, modified things, and some existing programming that might be relevant to volunteers where they're already virtually engaged and so forth, and you're as an organization having to really reinforce that messaging. So I know that a lot of our frontline organizations are particularly strained right now and could use help from some of the other organizations. So a little bit of resource sharing and with the region in their every other day they're doing some check-ins with organizations, and that's something that's coming up is how can we better share resources across organizations. So definitely connect with us if that's something. Any other key messages people are trying to convey or hoping to or would like to convey but not sure how? Yep. Okay. Well, then let me go into some of the other questions to get you thinking here. What are some useful communication strategies that you're implementing? Yes, you might be constrained as far as the platforms. You have the same platforms that are available to you. Maybe a few that you've learned by necessity at this time. Some people are getting into maybe Zoom conferences or other types of teleconferences, like this one on via Teams. But not just the tool, but the strategy. Are there ways in which you're trying to get your messaging out further? Are you asking for your volunteers to act as ambassadors for you? That's a good one if you're doing that, and how are you doing that? I'd love to hear from a couple of you about that.
Hi, everyone. This is Alex from Region Appeal. Can you hear me?
Hi, Alex. Yes, we can. You're gonna have to shout a little
Good.
bit. You're a little bit quiet.
Oh, really? Let me get my mic. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, that's
I've
better.
just got my headset on. So what was the questions about how are we communicating? Yeah, we're trying to figure out all the different ways that we can keep volunteers engaged and communicated with. Even for now, we're still waiting for direction from our senior leaders. So as we wait for specific supports that are needed from volunteers, we're asking, even just by normal check-ins with volunteers, emails, putting them on lists. There's a Google form that we created, just getting ready to have people fill out information to help us figure out skills. We're trying to get all of our reports ready, just with the right information. So when someone is coming asking, hey, we're going to need volunteers for such and such project, we're ready. So a lot of it is just reaching out, making sure people are interested. What are some of the skills they can offer? So there's a lot of collecting of information right now.
Right. Okay. And so like some of the the larger backbone organizations like the region will get people coming to them and having to mobilize people. In other cases, you've got organizations where they have a base of volunteers that is now going, hey, what do we do? So this is the sort of the where the collaboration really comes in and where it's important for us to be communicating on that front. And if you're finding that you have volunteers who are just see, for us at Volunteer in BC, we love to explain and convey the importance that volunteering has, not just to the community, but to the volunteer themselves, right? So some of your volunteers may themselves be feeling isolated or not knowing what to do with themselves at this time without their traditional volunteer position being available to them. So that's a good time for you to kind of relay them back to us, and we can definitely try to engage them and see where the needs are to mobilize them.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. How about organizations engaging volunteers in their external communications? At Volunteer in BC, Vrundas was on the call earlier, but I've got about 15 other volunteers in different capacities giving us input or showing us a little sort of strategic thinking or doing research for us, and they're really contributing a lot. But do other organizations engage volunteers to help either supporting their volunteer managers as far as reinforcing that, or are you conveying some communications or marketing and media through volunteers? You can give a shout out to your social media volunteers or that person who's constantly retweeting you. Okay, so we can think about these top topics, and we can come back to them. I think that we've definitely got some work ahead of us to do, especially as the communications piece evolves, as more of the organizations kind of settle from their emergency mode to trying to figure out, if this is going to be the case for several months, that the emergency measures are going to be in place. Then we'll have to elevate our communication strategies that way. So to that point, I want to speak a little bit about alignment. So aligning our communication strategies among both people who are in the position of being leaders of volunteers, where you're communicating to your own volunteers, and usually you're in that role. So you may not be in necessarily a formal marketing media role, but if you are, or you're in some kind of dual role, or simply you're trying to bridge the gap, then we can definitely work together to make sure that the same kinds of communications tools key messages are going out, and that we're using effective resource sharing. So to that end, if you have key messages that you'd like us to be putting into our pipeline, let us know. We can certainly try to reinforce that or make a special effort to share your messages additionally. If you're producing new programming and you're thinking about how can we get that program off the ground and support that, that's something we can do as well. But in addition, as we start to produce more and more templates from our key messages, we'd like to be able to share them with you, and for you to say, hey, we can use the same template, so that people will start to recognize this piece and start to see that, hey, this is something that is really important, whether that's a public health related messaging or whether that's a organization specific or volunteer recognition messaging. Really a good time to recognize volunteers. Then that's something we can do. So it is 1:15. So as I said, I'm fine if we conclude a little early. The topics that we are covering we're trying to adapt, and each week the situation's evolving, but let us know. We're definitely keeping in mind that there's a lot of questions coming up around safety and risk management floating about, especially how can we best convey to our volunteers and to our community what we're doing to keep them safe, and that might become an increased factor as things both go from sort of this lockdown mode where we're physically distanced, but also eventually when things slowly start to resume, or things will landscape might change in some way. So that's something that we have to really consider. So we're going to do some work, additional homework on all the resources that we have available, and update them on our versus COVID-19 page. But then that might also be a central conversation around what are your risk management practices, how can you protect people who are drivers, how can you protect people who are acting as volunteers, volunteer visitors, what maybe they're doing check-ins, and what they can say in the right way. Those are topics that we're thinking about, but we'd love to hear from you as far as what you'd like us to talk about, and what conversations you want us to facilitate. That's it for now.
There's quite a few questions.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I've been flipping between screens and not seeing that. Okay, let's go through. So let's go back here. So how are you competing with your own volunteers? And then Madhuri mentioned that she's checking in with our volunteers, calling them in person or sending them more specific emails to check in how they're doing. And then Andrea was commenting on that, and she said, we'd love to hear how other organizations are engaging their volunteers digitally. A lot of our volunteers are seniors, and volunteering is a way to keep them from being isolated. Any fun, unique ideas you have found that work so far? Okay, great. That is a very good question. Fun and unique ideas that people are doing to engage their volunteers, especially digitally, especially seniors. I heard recently, I had an email from a friend of mine who said that she was invited to a dance with like 1,000 people where they were all on Zoom doing a dancing. So that was actual programming that was created and so people are coming up with stuff. So I don't know if other organizations have already started coming up with either programs or ways of just capturing their volunteers' attention and keeping them connected. Has everyone done one-to-ones, or are we beyond that? Is that unwieldy for some larger organizations to get into that? I'm not sure. So that's one comment. Let's think about that and get some insight. Telephone check-ins as a start, and Skyping capabilities may not be nearly universal. Good point by Robert. So if people, not everybody is getting, is familiar with those teleconferencing tools, then there's two things. One is the accessibility of the tool, and then the second thing is the usability of the tool. So the accessibility of the tool may be something that if somebody doesn't have internet access, then calling them up and bringing them into that way is something important. The usability of the tools, it could be something where we have some work to do around showing their community how to use these tools and let them know, how to make it easy for them and doing some training on how to use Skype, how to use a teleconferencing tool. And Andrea added that we are currently doing email communications with fun celebrations, but always looking for new ideas. So that's something that we can do. Volunteer Center, and as well as other organizations want to contribute ideas to us, we can start to put a bank of fun ways to engage volunteers. Maybe that's a new page we can create. Andrea will capture all the ideas you currently have, and then we'll get some ideas from other organizations and start to see what fun is happening to engage volunteers. I was thinking, when I was saying about the e-cards, I was like, well, sending an e-card, that's one thing, but what if we actually did a video where we had some youth maybe drawing the e-cards by hand and then showing them on or reading a little storybook to somebody, like storytelling. Like, these are things that we could come up with that if we'd like to do them, then we are absolutely, by all means, will facilitate that collaboration. Deb added she has a few good ideas for this chat, and she's going to contribute those to us. So those are some great comments, folks. Any last thoughts or questions before we adjourn?
Sean, can we just talk very briefly as well about some of the risk management associated and the safety of the volunteers and some of the caremongering groups that are out there. Sure. For leaders or volunteer, it's super important. I know that risk management is always front and center. And I think we need to make sure that there's messaging out there to really, ensure that the people that are getting help one-on-one within their community to always make sure that they know that person first and foremost, because vetting of volunteers through formal organizations is always going to take care of that risk management. And so we're just hearing a lot of things going on in the community, hoping that everything is positive, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, so from a communication standpoint, Volunteer BC will produce some communication around that, and we'd love for you to be able to reinforce it. But the thing is, and this is one case that we can potentially collaborate on, is that we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes there are groups that are emerging, very grassroots, or they're starting to try to mobilize, and they're trying to make a good impact, and we want to support them in making that impact, but they're taking on some inherent risk. So if that's the case, where of an organization, please let us know. We're keeping track in a spreadsheet of those different groups popping up, and even they really could be really informal. Sometimes it's just a WhatsApp group where somebody is just chatting with their neighbor and they're saying, okay, this so and so person needs something, and it's not even intended to be a formal thing or a grassroots organization. Sometimes it's just people helping each other, but they don't necessarily know how to do that safely, or have the resources, the gloves, or the materials that they may require. So we want to be able to support that and also mitigate the risk. So please do reach out to us. And as Corinne said, if you know of any groups, or you are yourselves engaging with some of those groups, please do communicate to them the importance of following some good practices and taking heed from public health as far as how they can go about that in the right way. And if you need any support with facilitating that connection, we can definitely do that.
Yes, because at the end of the day, we would much rather that everything is funneled through Volunteer NBC, because we know that the organizations where we're sending our volunteers to will have the risk management in place. So if you do see or come across any of these caremongering groups, if there's a way that you can connect them with Volunteer NBC, that would be the best case scenario, because we have so many member organizations that that pretty much cover everything where there needs to be a need or tends to be a need. So just want to really keep that in mind. Is there any other pressing questions? So my name is Corinne Strong. I'm the Executive Director for Volunteer NBC. I wanted to say before we close that we really thank you for your ongoing commitment during these very trying times, and to reassure you that we're with you all the way. So if you have immediate needs, even the settlement organizations, if you can't have your link classes, maybe there's one-on-one mentoring that can happen, where you can still engage your volunteers. There's so many different ways that your volunteers can really be jumping in and to help you. We've been on a lot of calls with volunteer centers from across Canada, and with Volunteer Canada, and just to emphasize that they're behind us as well. We're getting a lot of really great messaging from Volunteer Canada that we will share with you and are sharing through our webpage. And they're getting a lot of international resources as well to help all of you to equip you to do your job better at this time. But your role as leaders of volunteers, to me, is now more important than ever, both to reassure your own volunteers, but certainly for your volunteers to help out in the community wherever they can. And that may be a shift from what you're currently doing as far as your program, but I think nothing is off the table, because the one big advantage you have is that your volunteers, first and foremost, are already such great ambassadors for your organizations. So if there aren't any more questions, we will convene again, and hopefully from the feedback from the surveys that you're completing, and if you haven't done so already, we would really love to hear from you. And we will arrange future topics based on that. Again, thank you so much for participating today. Really appreciate your time. I also wanted to really thank our volunteers that were on the call, our media volunteers, who have been tremendous in providing support for us, and in fact, all our volunteers. So Madhuri, I know she takes care of our volunteers internally. She's been keeping touch with them, keeping them up to date, checking in just to see how they're doing, especially with some of our older volunteers who themselves are very vulnerable and at times have very precarious situations that they're in. So thank you again. Really appreciate this. Enjoy the rest of the day, and trying to stay positive and be strong. Thank you.